Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Let's get started. Let's recap from last session and do a quick practice on what we did on day 2, and then we'll cover the rest of the things as mentioned here. That is, we'll deploy our application to Git, or we'll deploy a new application to Git and then go from there. And we'll look at how to compose components and how to pass data between, or how to enable communication between the components class and its view or its template. We have different ways, and then we'll go over them one by one. Interpolation, we have already seen that. We'll go and have a look at property binding, event binding, and how to validate input fields or form fields. And then we'll, if time permits, we'll have a look at how to communicate the data, communicate between components themselves or between different components. So let's go back to the day 2 agenda and have a look at what we did. Oops. What we did, and try to recap and refresh our mind with those concepts. So we looked at scaffolding. Scaffolding is nothing but what the IDE or the command line interface provides us as a facility to generate something. So we generated last time an app and also components, and we looked at a few options that the CLI provides us, and we looked at how things get scaffolded in Visual Studio just to get an idea of how different IDEs provide different scaffolding. And we looked at Angular CLI, and there are quite a few commands over there. We just looked at a few, and we'll look at a few that are mostly used, and then we'll just get a reference where we can look at other commands, and I'll share that reference with you. And we created a new Angular app using that CLI, and we briefly introduced JSON, how to write objects and arrays in JSON, and we kind of consumed it too. And we looked at what are components and what makes a class component, and we looked at two structural directives, ngIf and ngFor. They were pretty easy, and we did some practice, and I hope you did some practice on your end too. So let's go back to day 3 agenda and try to follow it. So we did a quick recap, and let's practice on day 2 things, which means first we'll create an app and try to deploy it, and then come back and do some more practice. So I have a new instance of Visual Studio Code open, and in the previous instance I have that app 1 that we created last time open. And let me go and open the terminal. So I'm at a folder where I don't want to be. So cd star cd projects. So what was the command to generate an app? Ng new. Let me go with app 3 because we already created app 1 and 2. And I'll give the flag this time to skip the installs because it takes a lot of time to actually finish the install. So we'll try to upload this to Git. So we'll skip install. So what does skip install mean? So while it does anything over there, or because we skipped install, hopefully this will be very quick. So it looks like it's not. So we'll go back to the other window, and okay, it's asking me the question, do I want to add Angular routing? We'll just say yes. Last time we said no, and we'll say yes this time and see what is different in the scaffolding of the app. So yes, and I'll still go with CSS. Okay. It gave us a bunch of warnings, but it did not install anything, and it created these files. So anyway, let's open that folder. So it created the regular stuff that we saw last time. What will be different this time is a new file called app routing module. Basically, this means we just separated out our routes. We'll go over what routes are in a bit in a different file. So when we say generate and separate app routing module, when it was asking the question while it was generating the app, or when we asked it to generate the app, it asked us the question if we want a separate routing file. That's what it basically means. We said yes, it created a different file just for routing, and that file that file basically had something called app routing module, and that module is imported over here in the base module. So we'll look at the modules later on, but this is what it did. Why did it do it? Just to separate out the routes. So where do our routes go? In this array with JavaScript JSON notation. We can have all our routes over here, and then we input our routes. What if we didn't have this module generated separately? Let's go back over here on our app one and see what's in there. There are no routes over here at all. Nothing. There is no separate module imported because we didn't have a separate one. And right now we don't have a routes on this application at all. Even here we don't have routes. This is empty, but at least we have a separation of the file so that we can just type the routes. But over here we'll have to type the routes and somehow make it a module or import it over here. We'll look at that later. Let's go back over here and have a look at these squigglies. So whatever is underlined in red uh, is called squiggly. So basically we have different colors squigglies in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, and probably other IDEs follow the same pattern. I'm not very sure. In any case, this means there is some error in the application, and when we hover over this red squiggly underline line or word or expression, it displays a little help over there. It says this syntax requires an imported helper, but module TSLib cannot be found. Basically, I mean, what is happening right now is because we skipped install, it doesn't know any of these Angular things, Angular package things. So what is happening over here when we skipped install, you can see that there is no node underscore modules generated. With install, it was there, and because of that fact that it was installing all these packages, it was taking a long time. So quite a few packages over here. Basically, I mean, we did not ask Angular to download all these packages directly, but we did indirectly. What that means is in package.json we have all these packages. What are termed as dependencies over here. So they start over here in line 14, and we asked Angular CLI to install all these, but these bring in their own dependencies. So they are dependent on some of their packages internally, and they bring along with installation their dependencies. So if you look at the package.json, it is a big file, 13,369 lines. So with Angular CLI create application, we are asking it to create an application with default base packages, and those packages are dependent on their own dependencies. That's why it took quite a bit to install all those dependencies. Anyway, let's keep moving forward to our next agenda item. Or is it the same item? Yeah, we will be trying to. We just practiced generating an app one more time with the options of separating out the routes in a different file, and we saw what it did. And now we'll have to install it anyway to eventually to be able to use it, because without those installations we cannot run these packages, run these apps. But at this point of time, let's try to get deployed to Git. So let's go over these options on the left, on the extreme left over here, and just have a brief overview of what they are. So if I hover over this icon, the icon already kind of, what you say, gives an idea that this is some kind of explorer, probably displays files, but when we hover over it, it displays a help in a tooltip. It says explorer of whatever the folder contains. So basically this will contain the files and folders within the folder that we have opened, and this is for search, or kind of global search, and it also enables a replace. So if you want to search for something in all the files, then we can use this search, or the shortcut is Control Shift F, Control Shift F. And this is for source control. We'll go over this. We'll come back to this after discussing these two. So these are additional extensions that so it's kind of extension explorer. So Visual Studio, when we install it, comes with some base functionality, base runtime that it by default supports. If you want additional features, then we can go for installing extensions. So right now I have an extension installed for C#, and which is enabled. And if you want more, then we can just search for an extension and then just enable it or install it within the Visual Studio. So let's search for cloud extensions that are already there. So there are quite a bit. All we need to do is just click on one and install over here. It will get installed, and if it needs restart, most of the time it doesn't need a restart of Visual Studio Code. If it needs, then it will display a warning to you, or a confirmation asking us if you want Visual Studio to restart itself. So anyway, that is Extension Explorer, and this comes with I believe this comes by default these days. Earlier it used to not be. What it means is, if I have any file, even standalone file, I can just run and debug using Node.js. And we see a way to the bottom, we have something called manage. So these are Visual Studio settings. So the first thing that I did after installing and opening Visual Studio Code was I went to color theme and changed the default dark theme to light theme, because I don't like dark theme and it stresses my eyes. So anyway, these are the settings that we can manage, or Visual Studio Code settings that we can manage globally or per project or per folder. And this is my user account. Right now I'm not signed in. If I was signed in to GitHub or whatever other options that Visual Studio Code provides, then my information will be displayed over here. And this I think is pretty familiar to us from the different applications, different email clients and all that stuff. Anyway, let's keep moving forward and come back to here. This is for source control. By default, Visual Studio Code enables us to connect to Git. So let me just type something here. Initial commit. So I'm assuming that you are familiar with source control. If you're not, I'll just define it for us, for who don't know. Source control is kind of a repository or a godown of our code. We put our code in there, or I mean, we are initially putting the code, or we are getting started to put our code over there. And the advantage of using source control is it tracks the source control changes for us. So once it is there and then we modify some file or add files or remove files, it keeps a record of all those actions. If we have to go back, then it will be very easy for us compared to not using source control at all. There are no changes to commit. So this is app 3. Reopen the terminal. View the existing terminal rather than opening another one. It says we have problems in this file. I mean, this is basically under problems tab. It says this is not defined because we haven't installed our packages yet. So it's not committing anything because the Git or source control provider that we intend to use is not initialized, I believe. So let me run a command called git init. So like the commands for Angular CLI, they start with ng. The commands for Git, they start with git, because that's how it's been provided. So reinstalling existing Git repository. Anyway, it did something, and it may I believe we are ready to commit to Git. There are no changes to Git. Okay, let me try another way. I'll go to github.com, and because I'm already signing in, I'm already signed in. I'm seeing my repositories over here. If you are new, then this section will be empty, and regardless of it is empty or not, we can just create a new repository over here. And because our app name is app3, I'm naming my repository name as app3 too. I will just go with the default options and not dwell a lot over these. So now my repository is ready. GitHub makes it very easy for us to push and pull our code or manage our code within the source control. Very easy. So it says if you want to push an existing repository from the command line, use these commands. So it says there are no changes somehow. Let me just run this command and see if we just put my code over there. So basically this command is saying, okay, this is about Git and remote add origin. Remote is like, okay, not on my system, it's someplace else. Add that place over here, add origin. So origin of the code at this location. So once the origin is set, the next thing it asks us to do is push it to that origin. So git push _u origin master. Master is in source control, we can have different branches. By default, we'll have a master branch. And we are not creating any new branches, we are just asking it to push it to master branch. So that's all it is. It's pretty simple. I was hoping that it would show my initial changes or all the files that we created under this app3 over here. But anyway, I mean, just to demonstrate, we'll just make some changes. We'll install it later. Let's go to the file explorer, and actually just while we are at it, we can practice generate component command too. So ng generate, what was the next? We are generating a component. So C, and we have to give a component name. Let's do something like this: component slash test component. And we can utilize a dry run flag all the time just to verify that what we expect is what we are getting. So hit enter. Asking, Google is asking if you want to participate in something, to send the data in case of some to send our data to them so that they can use it for their analysis. So just say no. So what would it do when we run that command? It would create a components folder, which we don't have right now. If we've already had this folder, then it would not create another folder, but it would just put our component under that folder. So components folder, and then it will create a test component folder name. It will create a separate folder for our component and put our component things under it. So it would create a template, a separate template HTML, and it would create a separate TS class. It would create a CSS file and a spec.ts for the unit testing of that particular component. So things look good. Let me just run it without dry flag or dry run flag. I mean, we saw the command, we got the little bit of practice one more time, but let's create a component manually so that we know what it takes and we know how the CLI command facilitates that easiness. So I mean, just to demonstrate that it's not impossible, and actually initial Angular CLI didn't have that command. Uh, it used to be a manual process. So anyway, let's create a folder. Even before that, let me go back to this command, run with dry run or without dry run. What would it actually do? Our command was to create in a a component in a camel case. Over here we can see test T is starting with smaller case, lower case, and for the component C is starting with uppercase. And like we talked about, this is called lower camel case. But what it did is, with respect to the files, it introduced hyphens in between those words, and they're all small, right? So this is the Angular convention. Files are named this way with hyphens and all lowercase, and components would be named in upper camel case. So while we are writing that command to generate something, keep that in mind. Things will be a little bit different because there's a convention they follow, but once you get used to it, then you will be comfortable with that. So it's not a big deal, but I just wanted to point that out as to what exactly happened over there. So if you wanted to create a component manually, then what would it take? Let's make it quick, and let's do components folder, and under that folder, let's create. Let's follow the convention. All we are trying to practice over here is what it takes if we wanted to create a component manually. So this is test component folder, and under that folder, new file. So we'll create the template first, or we'll just create the TS class file first. So that would be test component dot ts. So if you notice over here, everything is test component dot component, and after that the extension differs. For HTML template, it's .html. For the actual component class is .ts, because we are writing the class in TypeScript. If you were writing a class in JavaScript, then it would be .js, and then CSS is for styling and CSS, and spec.ts. Spec, whenever you see spec, it means it's for testing. That file is specific for testing. In this case, this is unit testing. If it was under the E2E folder over here, then it would be end-to-end testing. So let me hit enter, create a class, and I'm going to create a class first because we will see how not to use the other stuff, because other stuff are generated for us for additional purposes and they are not a must. So we'll write the class first. Class would be upper camel case. So export class test component. So this is a plain class. What makes it an Angular component is we have to decorate it with something called component. And the decorators in Angular, they start with, or this is not Angular, but this is a TypeScript concept. So decorators in TypeScript, because TypeScript is using Angular, we are writing in that style. So decorators are nothing but some class, some other class imported and used, and we have to use the @ symbol before it just to mark it as a decorator. So we are trying to mark this class as a component. So this the other metadata goes under this curly braces. So what it needs, last time we have seen, it either needs a component for its template, needs a template or template URL. But even before that, it needs something called selector. Selector is some text or a phrase that could be used as a tag. So right now we'll just write something like this component. And normally the best practice is to append it, or Angular suggested practice is to append it with app hyphen. So this is taken care of. And let's go with template. Template URL scheme we have already seen. Let's have a little bit of practice with the template too. So for the template, all we need is some tags. Instead of in a separate file, we just need that HTML over here. Div, or instead of going for a div all the time, let's go for a paragraph, and let's type the closing tag right away. And then this is a paragraph. This is a test component. Let's have one more paragraph. And over here we'll use interpolation and display some property over here. That property we will have to define over here, but we'll come to that in a bit. So let's have title from test component, and we'll have to define that property over here. Title is of type string. So this is from the last time what we have seen. The title was something like this. Oops. From the component TS, just to have a look at this. So title goes like this. This is a little bit longish. What it basically means, after colon, I mean we specify colon to specify the type of this title property. So this is a shortcut of what's looking at this particular section of the line. TypeScript infers the property of this title to be string, so we don't have to specify explicitly. But if you didn't know, then we might be a little bit confused. So if there is a confusion, this is what it means. So instead of title, let me make it as title1 so that the squiggly is not bothering us. And then let's say some property, I'll just name it as prop1. And if it was like a number instead of a string, that it would infer. Or this is same as saying prop1 number, and that initialization is 1. So in this line, what we did is we specified the type of the title property and also initialized it with a string, and the contents of the string is component practice. Anyway, let's go with the long form this time, and later on we'll just use the shortcuts to it. Anyway, it's displaying a squiggly for us because we haven't installed the packages. Let me actually get uh, them installed. Actually, I believe at this point of time we can switch back to our app one and keep making changes over there, because we don't have to install. That way we'll escape installing all these packages over here and wait for a long time. Anyway, the concept that I was trying to show over here is generating these manually. Also, it needs style URLs, or just styles. But anyway, we will just keep them empty. We don't have to specify them right away, because we are not using the other files, or we are not we are trying to have a component manually added with bare minimum things. So right now selector doesn't need a file, a new different file at all. Template, depending on our needs, we might need a new file, but we are inlining the template, not trying to have a template in a separate file. So we don't have to create .html file for that, and we are not having a specific styles for this component. So we will not will keep the array for the style URLs empty. So this is our component. We have just manually successfully created our component. What Angular CLI does is something extra, or we can just ask it to skip all these things too. So still, it's easy to create a component, or anything else for that matter, using a CLI, rather than creating folders and files underneath that. So there might be cases where doing that is more easier than using CLI, but I haven't come across such a case. Anyway, let's copy this one. Let's not even copy. So you get the idea to how to manually create. And this is okay. One last step that I actually have to show. It is the most is like we have to tell Angular, or this particular component file, where to get this component, where to get the definition of this component. So something like this. So angular.core is not installed. That's why it's showing the squiggly over here. But we have to import the component. Component would be defined in Angular core. That's where we have to get the definition of this component from. There might be different classes defined by different packages, named the same component. So in that case, if we are using that component, we have to import the component from that particular package, from that particular file. So once we go further in this course, we'll get comfortable with that import statements too. So let's leave app3 over here, or not leave over here, but let's talk about the Git part of it. So right now everything is ready. It just some of the things are not installed. That's why we see those cookies again. I don't know why I'm repeating that again and again. Probably you get the idea. So over here we see something different from earlier. So a number 2 within a blue background and a white 4 color is displayed over here. Let's click on that. Basically, it's telling us that there are 2 changes with respect to what we have checked in last time. And one of the change is you see a flag over here with U, and you see a flag over here with M. M means modified, like it is telling us over here, and U is untracked. Basically, that means this is a new file. So to commit to Git, all we have to do is just add a comment, test component, or just something like add a test component. And if we click on these files, or on the files that are modified, it will display us a before and after comparison of what happened. So before there was no mention of the CLI analytics. If you want Google to, if you want our system to send Google our usage statistics so that they can analyze, and we answered it as false or no. That's why that flag is appended. So that is the only change, and because this is a new file and it doesn't have any changes, so the left pane of the comparison is blank and the right pane has our changes. So to push these changes to our repository, all we do is enter a comment over here and commit. For something to go to the repository, there are steps or there are stages. First we commit, and then that commit will go in something called a stage, and that stage could be committed to GitHub. So this is what is asking. I don't have any previous stage changes for these new changes to be added to that stage. Let me actually just make a note over here. So we commit and then we stage and we commit again. The first commit is commit local. So Git manages a local repository too. So locally you commit these changes, you mark these changes as committed, as done, so that I can proceed on other changes. So let's say I'm working on two different things, two different items assigned to me on the same app. I can, if I have changes one finished, then I'll just commit my changes and go back to working on changes two. So that way these changes are managed as a unit. So the first commit is local commit, and then we can stage and we can commit to the actual repository. Right now this dialog is telling me that I don't have any staged changes. Would you like to automatically stage all your changes and commit them directly? I just say yes. And then over here we can see a source control section on the bottom status bar. So basically this is telling us we are working on a master branch. If we had more branches within the same repository, then we can just click on it and switch on to a different branch. So anyway, this course is not about Git, so we'll not go into detail for on that front. So little bit of description on why we need branches is there might be more than one developer working on the same app. So the concept is these developers will create a branch for themselves and they will commit to those branches, and once they are ready, once they have tested end to end and they are satisfied with what they have put in, they will just create a pull request asking others to get their latest changes. And once those latest changes are tested by testers and reviewers, when it is good to go, we commit those changes from the branch to master. So master is a master copy of all the changes, of all the good changes. So let's say on a branch, if the reviewer and testers, they find bugs and they will just revert back to the developer asking him to fix them. So right now master branch is maintained pure, maintained bug free. I mean, let me put that in quotes, bug free. But the branches are, developers are free to work on their branches and commit as much as they think is feasible or good enough. So anyway, that was about a little bit of about branches in Git. So that's what is displaying over here, telling us that we are working on the master branch directly, and this zero with a down arrow means there are zero incoming changes. That means there are no other developers or there are no other changes from any of the other developers that might be working on this app. So we don't have to download anything. The down arrow means if you want, we can download it from here. Or the up arrow over here means we just staged one of our changes and that can be pushed to the origin. That is GitHub in this case. So this is a kind of a shortcut to actually sync, to actually download anything if anything is incoming, or upload whatever is outgoing from my machine. And instead of using that download, we can push using these options. Okay, not push, or the terminology is push, but over here it's giving me the text as commit. So I can say commit all and I have commit stage. At this point of time, it both means the same because that's all I have, just one thing. So I can click over here or choose this one of these options. So pull is for getting anything that is incoming, and commit all is getting pushing our changes to the repository. So I'll just use this option for now. Just confirmation of what I'm trying to do, and I'll just confirm. I know whatever I'm doing, I know about it. I just want to go ahead with that. So let's go to GitHub and refresh. And we can see 4 minutes ago we did something on this folder. 4 minutes ago we did something on this file. So let's click on the file. You can go in the folder and have a look at the changes, and it will display those changes too for anybody else if whoever want to review or test your app. It's too much rearranging of this chat window. Anyway, so we have this. We are into history now. At this component, whatever changes we have, it displays in a little good interface like that. So anyway, this is about it. I think we are falling short. We need to speed up. So we took care of this and we took care of this, and let's go with composing components. Let's switch back to app 1 and quickly generate a component. This time I'll generate something called navbar. I did not give the drive run flag over here. Hopefully this will be okay, but it's a good practice to have the dry run first and have a loop, just so that we don't have to clean all that stuff once it is generated. So anyway, this is good. It created a folder for itself, and it put my component under that folder. So navbar, why do we need the navbar? Let's have a look at that in just a bit. So just open HTML. So it generated a component for us saying navbar works. We'll leave it like that for now. All we try to see is how to compose, how to consume this component. So let me, even before that, let me just get started with ngserve so that it does it compiles our app and we don't have to wait for it while we talk about other stuff. So last time we have seen ngserve. ngserve builds our application and makes it ready to serve us at some URL. Last time we have seen it was at localhost at port 4200, and that is the default port used by many frameworks and Angular as well. So ngserve, there is an option with ngserve with -o. That means open the browser window right after you are compiled. So let's use that option. Instead of manually opening that browser window, we can just automate it. So anyway, this is navbar works displayed as an HTML, and that navbar is a component decorated by this component because Angular, we have already installed Angular stuff or whatever is included in package.json. It is not throwing the error as to that it cannot recognize Angular/code. So this component resides, or the definition of a component is from this import statement, and it has a selector, -nav -bar, and template URL. We are asking it to consume the component, the template file with .html extension, and style URLs. We are asking it to consume within in the same folder. Look for a file name with this one, with this name and extension. So That's taken care of, and let's go back to component.html, and just under the title, or just above the title all the way up, let's have app nav bar. So we are just trying to consume that the component newly generated for us. So it opened the file, and we can see nav bar works. So that's one way to consume another component. So app component is consuming navbar component right now. It's utilizing, will improve that as we go along. But right now, this is one of the ways to consume. So let's go back to the agenda and see. This is what it is, and we'll look further on composing components in bullet point E. For now, that thing got introduced, and let's go to bullet point B. How to pass data. We briefly looked at it. I'll just close the other window. And one thing you might have noticed already, that the node underscore modules are ignored, or git ignored. That means we don't push it to git. Push this folder to git because it's very huge, and it is big in size, and whatever information we need, whatever packages we need, we already have the information over here. And then once we install the packages, and let's say we want to install the packages after the fact, right? Because on app 3 we skipped it. How to install? Kind of, what do you say, wandering around, but I think it's important to cover that point. So app 3 over here, we'll open it quickly. If you want to install the packages after the fact, then we just run a command, just npm install. In extra space, I guess it doesn't matter, but npm install will take care of all the installations. I'm not recording this. Generate component ng generate npm. So just like other commands, the shortcut, there is a shortcut for this command too. You don't have to type the complete word install. You can just say I, and it means the same. So I'll just get started with that, just to demonstrate that command. Anyway, let's come back to app 1. And so node.modules doesn't go in the git because it's too huge, and we don't want to maintain that at all. We want to maintain the packages, or what packages are involved in package.json. And these are folders from those packages, and they need to be here while we are running the application. So in app.components, we saw how to interpolate. App.component.html interpolate using these curly braces or double curly braces. And last time when we were running this application, we saw something odd. The table was not rendering as is, and that was an oversight. A div cannot go in a table. I mean, it can go in a table cell, it cannot go midway wherever it wants. So that was the problem, and we actually don't need that div at all. So we'll just copy the directive and get rid of that div. Now this is better, semantically correct HTML. Earlier it was faulty HTML, and that was my oversight. So now we are telling it, using the ngFor directive, we are telling Angular, repeat creation of these table rows, tr tag, for each product. We had 2 products, so it should create two rows for us. Now this is better looking HTML or better looking HTML table. Now we'll get rid of this product property. I close the nav bar for now because will not be working on it, at least for the foreseeable time. So anyway, there is no product, and this is complaining that we just there is no property now called product because we just deleted it. So we'll get rid of this one too. So let's say we will not display the product ID, and instead define a give me a minute over here to recompose myself. Trying to think of a good property that goes, okay, let me use the ID property. So for each table row, we can give an HTML ID, and the ID is supposed to be unique, but right now we are repeating the TRs for all the products. So ID need we cannot hardcode the ID. Let's use the products ID as the HTML ID of that row itself. Now let's go back to our browser window and have the developer tools open to have a look at that ID property, because it's not a property that can be displayed. We'll have to go to the source and have a look at if that property got generated or not. Anyway, this edge is a little problematic. I'll open this in Chrome. This is way too slow than I was expecting it. Hopefully it will come back pretty quick. So if we expand that, okay, you can see that ID over here. So this is the ID of the product. So basically what it means is we just saw how to bind a property. We saw interpolation earlier using double curly braces or double curly braces, and how to bind to an HTML property to a particular HTML property is this way. It doesn't have to be HTML, it can be a component property too, is by using square braces, square brackets, right? Okay, that's all it is, very simple. And then let's go with event binding. What is event binding? Let's say I have, similar to property binding, there is event binding. Event binding is something like goes out a little different, or in a way, this is incoming. So we are consuming products, and for each product, we are trying to consume that incoming product's ID. And now this is kind of outgoing. So when click happens from this HTML, over here property binding is from component class to its template HTML. Whereas the property binding is from the HTML template to component. We are asking the component to handle it. So handle click, it can be any name. Right now I'll just go with handle click. So this handle click needs to be defined over here as a method. Handle click. So just for right now, just write, let's write to console.log. We are in handle click. This is done. This. So you see, I clicked 2 times basically. First time I thought it was not working because in my mind I wrote an alert rather than console log. Anyway, this console log, the number 2 says this is displayed 2 times. This is repeated 2 times. Console logged 2 times. So let me click one more time. I refresh the page. Right now the console is empty over here. And let me click once. Handle click. And one more handle click. But this will not help us a lot because we don't know which row it was clicked on. So for that purposes, we can pass in something called $event from here, and that could be consumed over here. Let me name that as EVT, and let's output that EVT or console log that EVT rather than some hard-coded string. So this is refreshed. So in EVT, what is there? We have information about the entire event. So this is a mouse event, and whatever mouse event gives us, all that is logged over here. We could have just said over here, instead of that information, handle click with this product, with the product that this particular row belongs. So oops. Just collapse this so that we have additional space. So let's click on that one more time and see we have a product information over here. So basically our app most likely needs our business logic. We don't need information, and sometimes we do the information about those events, but at this point of time, probably our relevant information is product rather than the event. Or just in case if you want to have both of them ready, we can just say, we can pass on both the things instead of just one, either this or that. So it doesn't have to be an empty method or a method with one parameter. It can be a method with multiple parameters. So what did we pass in as a first parameter is the event information. We'll leave it as is, and for the second we'll just say product. Oops, product, and then leave it. So we can console log the product and both, or do whatever the business needs us to do to process that product as. So right now we'll just ignore the console logging or a lot of console logging and then just log the product over here. And we'll add more functionality as we go on. So going back to the template and having a look at what we just did, we just practiced or we just demonstrated property binding and an event binding. So this doesn't have to be just a click event, it can be any HTML event. There is a event called mouse over, and we'll bind it. How to bind? Very simple. If you don't bind it, it will look for an event in the HTML itself. And if you bind it, it will go to the TS file or TypeScript file and try to find that handler over there. So mouse over, let's say handle mouse over. So we'll follow the convention of camel casing it rather than not following the Angular convention. So mouse over, and what do we need over here? And we don't have to pass in the entire product. We can just pass in the information that we need to process. Dot name. Yep, something wrong is happening with my keyboard. Okay, chat. Yeah, that is a good suggestion. Let's add a border one for the table tag. I was planning to get rid of table tag eventually anyway, so I was not bothering with styling it anymore. But I think that is a good suggestion. It will help us follow along better. Border one. Okay, this is good. Somehow, yep. So something went wrong because we hit the table cell with the product ID, but we did not hide its header. So let's hide that header. Adding that border helped at fixing semantically faulty HTML. So this is good. Jazakallah khairan for your suggestion. Alhamdulillah. So it says there is no template URL. It says it's some error. Let's go back and try to fix that. Handle mouse over. Basically, handle mouse over is not defined. Let's fix that first. We don't need a column over here, semicolon. So oops. Console.log. What do we want to? What information did we send from there? Product name, or that was my intention. So just send product name because maybe we don't need the entire object over there. So name will be our name of that incoming parameter on this method. We can even strongly type that to a string because that's what we expect. So we'll just type it to string and console log that p name. Over here, that you can see a gray squiggly, if I can call that. Over here, what it is saying is parameter prod implicitly has an any type, but a better type may be inferred from usage. Basically, it's telling us that it will fix it somehow. And what is the fix? Actually, this is not an error. This is kind of a best practice to have a strongly typed parameter. So this is of the type we don't know yet. We don't know the type of the product yet because we haven't defined an explicit class for that product. So right now we don't have that definition. So we can go with any and that error will go away. Or that warning will go away. Or that suggestion, it's not even a warning, it's just a best practice. So let's call it a suggestion. That will go away. And it's better to have to follow those practices rather than not follow them. So anyway, we have strongly typed them, and this is not, I mean, theoretically it's a strongly typed, but it's not really strongly typed. Any means any as in leaving it blank. So anyway, this is what the extension behind these TS files is called TSLint. It expects that. So we just take care of that, and then we'll move along. We'll come back and strongly try to strongly type this product at least. So we strongly type the p name parameter in handle mouse over, and let's see the effect of it. Oops, that is not, it looks like it's not working. Click is working, but mouse over is not working. So is mouse over an event? It should be an event. Did I bind it? Yes, I did bind it. And this is mouse over on the name. So anyway, I'll try to look into what's going on later, what's going wrong with this later, but this is how we bind the property and the event. Curly braces, and I don't know what is this, what are these braces called? It's not coming to my mind right now. Anybody has a suggestion? Semicircle braces for now. Let's go with that. It's not coming to my mind. Anyway, property binding, event binding. Let's take this further. Let's go back to the title. And if there is show title, then we are showing the title. And if the show title is blank or false, then we will not show the title. And let's introduce an input tag over here and ask the user input for the title rather than the app code hard coding a title for the users. So input, this will be of type text. We are asking user to enter text, so we'll explicitly say that this is type text is default anyway, we don't have to say it, but let's be explicit in that. And let's close the tag. And we want it, anyway, we'll come back to showing or not showing it in a bit, and then we want an event to actually handle it. So let's use the event binding on change update title. So just to follow, just to demonstrate that we don't have to have this convention all the time, we can have other conventions too, other in naming the event handlers or property or event binded handlers. So let's write that method over here, update title. Yep. And we need to pass on something from there. That let's pass in something called event, and we saw what when we pass an event what it contains. Right now this will contain an on change or changed event. So let's have a look at that anyway. Let's console log that. Let's name this parameter as input for now, or just inp, and then let's console log inp. Visual Studio, it provides some shortcuts while coding too. If I just say log, and if you say a square like this, that means it's a snippet. And when you, if you want, you can click on it, or if you want to just use the keyboard, then you can hit tab and tap twice. It will write that console.log statement for me. So I'll be using that shortcut as much as I can. So over here, let's just console log inp, and let's see what we get this way. Let's change that. For some reason, it's not getting displayed again. Or change. I was expecting it to get triggered, but somehow it's not. I don't know at this point why. This clicked work. Okay, anyway, for now, let me just introduce a button and then uh, utilize that click event rather than on change event. The effect would be overall effect would be same, but I'll try to figure out on change, and then in our next session we'll discuss why this on change and mouse over were not working. I'll troubleshoot that and come back to you. Anyway, let's move forward with input type button and on click. We'll use the event binding over here. Actually, let me demo. Okay, we'll figure out why on change is not working. I'll just revert back this change. I'll comment this out, and instead of using the on change event, actually this is much better than using the on change event at all. So let's bind the value property of this input field to the app title itself. That was the property, right? Or just title. And then let's two-way bind it. So basically we are trying to combine the property binding and event binding. And this is called event binding because it's on the event, but bottom line, this is from template to component, and this is from component to template. Here it's a combination of both. So if there is a change in the component, it will get reflected over here. If there is a change on the template, it will get reflected in the component. So it's two-way binding. That is what I was supposed to do. I don't know why I went for on change, but we'll fix that. So let's go back and look over here. So right now you see that property value is right over here. It's in the text in the text box. Let me change it over here to, instead of app one, move forward. So I don't know, am I unlucky? It should have been updated over here too. But again, I fail to understand why it is not working. I'm just introducing a horizontal line. No, wrong place. Okay. Value is a wrong construct or wrong property attribute that I have used. It should be ng model. Oh man, no. Okay. Anyway, let me take this validation part out, and we'll take care of it in the next session. And let me add text over here. So actually, there is something else going on. I thought, it escaped my mind that we need some additional modules for this kind of thing to work. It's called forms module. We haven't imported them yet, and we'll import them soon, and we'll have a demo later on. So I'm sorry to digress and something not working, but what was working until things started to go wrong is the event binding or uh, template to component binding and property binding, that is component to template binding. So that was working. That means in our agenda we covered 1 and 2 and 3. For 4 we'll come back later. Right now it's 9:21. I don't know if it is a good idea to start any topic, but if you have any question on whatever we did until now, right from day one, you can ask now. And we'll move forward with the communication and passing data binding between components, different components in our next session. Yep. So a good shortcut in Visual Studio to open any file instead of going to the Explorer all the time is Control P. Control P will display, will pop up a panel like that, and you can start typing the name of the file that you wanted open. So I'll just open this one over here and then import something called Forms module. No questions? Please feel free to ask any question. So I would strongly encourage everyone to create a GitHub profile and put your code over there. You don't have to, you can make it private too if you are kind of shy. But have it over there. It will help in the long run. It will help for you to have some app that you can show as your achievement and have it in your profile. Having something, even if not perfect, is better than not having anything at all. So you can even have it in a private mode until you are ready to show it as a one of your achievements. Okay, I guess you don't have any questions right now, and it's sometimes difficult to compose a question quick enough. But we have our WhatsApp groups. Feel free to ask any question, even from day one or day two or whichever you think. Even if some concept that I haven't gone through, if you want it clarified, then please feel free to ask any question. If our plan covers that topic, then I will hold off on that until we are ready. And if I didn't have any plan, then we'll arrange, and if need be, we can arrange additional sessions during weekdays too, just to clarify things, just to keep us moving forward. If there is any stumbling block, let me know. Anything stopping you from practicing or moving forward, let me know. Inshallah, I'll make time to help. All right, so since we don't have any questions and we are close to our slotted time anyway, so I'll just end the session over here. Jazakallahu khairan. Keep practicing, inshallah.